Ideas have consequences. Bad ideas have victims. A new law in New York will lead to many victims. And I'm not talking about the coronavirus. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. This is Breakpoint. On April the 9th, right in the middle of New York's epic battle against COVID-19, the state legislature passed and Governor Cuomo signed a bill that legalizes commercial surrogacy. As of February the 15th next year, residents of New York will be able to enter into legally enforceable surrogacy contracts. Now, from the beginning to the end, this debate was never driven by any serious consideration of what's good for women or children, but instead by heartstring rhetoric, celebrity endorsement, and especially gay rights advocates. As I predicted, the final proposal lacks adequate and necessary safeguards against the exploitation and commodification of women's bodies or even the commercialization of children. Underscoring the shameful nature of this legislation, proponents secured it by subterfuge, smuggling it past both religious conservative and feminist opponents in the mandatory budget measure, even though commercial surrogacy has nothing to do with the state budget. So now, in New York, amidst all the rhetoric about human dignity, the poor and marginalized, and protecting the vulnerable, lawmakers kicked wide the door to potential exploitation of surrogates, especially those from low-income backgrounds. The exploitation of poor women is the subject of a best-selling and award-winning 2019 novel called The Farm. In this book, set fittingly in a New York of the not-too-distant future, a tiny, wealthy, highly unrepresentative slice of the population are the beneficiaries, while the poor are exploited. In real life, like I've said before, commercial surrogacy is led by same-sex couples who benefit while poor women are exploited. According to an informal study commissioned by the Chicago Tribune in 2016, 10 to 20% of donor eggs and fertility clinics went to gay men who were ordering babies through surrogacy. The overall number that represents was at the time skyrocketing, up 50% in just 5 years. And when you consider that self-identified gay people make up about 3% of the population and not all of them are trying to become parents in a lab, you realize just how much this population group is driving the surrogacy movement. Not coincidentally, the sponsors of New York's law, like the sponsor of a similar 2018 law in Washington state, openly gay. Both of these laws reflect the most destructive cultural views of our time. One idea is that love is love, which, if you remember, was the slogan behind the advance of same-sex marriage. The problem is the slogan's Gnostic. It only makes sense if we pretend bodies don't exist or if we exclude biological realities from any consideration of what love means. And once that's done, those who have intentionally chosen sterile unions, arguing in fact that procreation is irrelevant to such unions, can now demand the right to have children. Not only that, but the love is love mantra extends beyond procreation now to parenting, as if there were no differences between a mother's love and a father's love, and as if intentionally depriving children of one or the other is completely acceptable. After demanding children without sex, we now impose on those children an upbringing without a mom or a dad, intentionally, as if a second dad could replace a mom or a second mom could replace a dad. It's the final chapter in a long and brutal history of the sexual revolution's most terrible myth. The kids will be fine. But they're not, and neither are poor women who are made even more vulnerable to exploitation by commercializing their bodies. India, whose per capita GDP is 3% that of New York's, sees this, and that's why they ban surrogacy. Katie Faust of the Children's Rights Group, Them Before Us, and a speaker at our upcoming Truth Love Together live event puts it this way: abortion and reproductive technologies like surrogacy are two sides of the same child commodifying coin. Abortion says if a child is unwanted, I can force her out of existence, even if it violates her right to life. Surrogacy says if a child is wanted, I can force her into existence, even if it violates her right to her mother and father. This New York law is shameful, and like all bad ideas, it will leave victims in its wake, especially women and children. For Breakpoint, I'm John Stonestreet.